Yes, yes, yes. Welcome back, welcome back. So we've unpacked the rubric, our Module B, Critical Study of Literature. So this one will look at how do we actually think and read critically to establish an interpretation. Okay, so does this sound familiar, a critical study of literature? It should, because we did a critical study of King Lear last year. Okay, so we read and responded to the text. We understood Shakespeare's context and the social influences and other texts that influenced the creation of King Lear. We analysed, did a close reading, researched other readings and interpretations, and then finally consolidated our own interpretations. All right, so just to clarify, that reading is a verb, but it can also be a noun. Okay, so reading is comprehending. So a reading is a description of who, what, when, where. A close reading is when we analyse. So we're unpacking and finding the features, devices, techniques that shape meaning and brought you to this initial understanding. Critical reading is a much more in-depth process. Okay, so you read and respond. You consider context. All right, so it involves research. Okay, you acknowledge other readings. How have other people interpreted the text? Then you reflect on your own response again to determine your personal interpretation and make sure that you've got the evidence to support why this is true. Okay, so let's unpack this particular process of critical reading to come to a critical reading. So we respond to the text. So we articulate our first impressions, our initial understanding, and a lot of that is going to be influenced by your own personal context. You understand the context of the composer and the society that they wrote in, and what about that world influenced and shaped their text, and what they wrote about. You do a decon, close reading. So what are the techniques, devices, features that shape meaning and bring you to this response? You then research. What have academics, literature critics said? What have your own peers said? How have various audiences responded? Look at T.S. Eliot interviewed. Look at feature articles, both in his time and in ours. And all of this process, 1, 2, 3, 4, should then bring you to a nice comprehensive understanding. What is your understanding of the text? And you should be able to also compare it against others. Okay, oh, whoopsies. Let's pull this down. Okay, so does this look familiar? You should remember the painting Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. We did a very quick critical reading of this. So we went through the process. So we initially responded, got our first reading, who, what, when, where, why. Then we analysed and looked at the visual devices that brought us to that initial response. Then we acknowledged context. So we then found out who the composer was, what his intention was, and the story behind this lady. Okay, and that did change some people's initial readings. We then looked at a few art critics' reviews of the artwork and how they sort of interpreted the text. We listened to each other's interpretations and then consolidated our own critical reading. Okay. So what we're going to do now is look at another artwork. Why isn't that going away? I don't know. Okay. So, first of all, what is your initial reading or response to the following? So you will need a pen and paper here, or your device, like get a document up, okay, and your responses to this will be submitted. And look, you don't have to go too in depth here. I don't want this to be an onerous process, just so we get an understanding of the various steps that we have to go through in order to come to a critical reading. or a critical interpretation. So what is your initial reading or response to the following text? So we're looking at who, what, when, where. So for instance, my personal reading is I think this is about a futuristic, grandiose structure that has some kind of godly or omnipotent force sort of praising it or influencing it. And it could be a place of power, perhaps a place of religion, a place of force. Okay, so however you see this, I just want you to write down just 1 to 2 sentences. What is your reading of this? What is your comprehension? So pause now, write up your response. Okay, so you've now got a reading, a comprehension of the text. So now you're going to do a close reading. So what devices have actually brought you to that understanding? So some of the things that we need to consider: tone, mood, atmosphere, and how that's achieved, symbolism, colour, lighting, line, shape, composition, point of view, etc. So for my grandiose, futuristic structure with this sort of otherworldly force influencing it, I'm going to say that a low-angle point of view of the audience enhances the sort of grandiose aspect. It makes it seem like some sort of powerful presence. I'm going for this futuristic appeal because the lines are very hard. There's no soft curves. It's hard-edged, lots of greys, silvers. The structure itself has shapes that are associated with sort of futuristic themes. And I'm looking at the lighting that sort of exudes from the top. It's sort of, to me, is an allusion to, perhaps God or some other powerful being or presence is sort of influencing its power and guidance onto the building. Okay, so here and you know what, I'm actually, whatever this force or presence is that comes into the structure, it's then being released and it's influencing those around as well. Oh my God, isn't that interesting? I'm so existential. All right, so now you just need to pause, identify, I don't know, two to five visual techniques that brought you to your initial reading. So pause, write down your answer in your document, and then come back. Okay, so just to bring you back to this idea of your initial reading and how you come to it, you've got to also consider what personal factors impacted on that reading. Okay, so personally, I've just rewatched Game of Thrones, and it's just full of these amazing structures and castles and really, opulent places and dwellings, so sort of ostentatious. And there's a character that you never see called the Lord of Light, and has this influence on a particular sort of religious sect. And I think that has sort of influenced my reading of this. And I've also been doing a course on science fiction texts, Blade Runner, Space Odyssey. So I think that sort of has influenced my gravitation towards this being futuristic. So just have a little reflection on what sort of other texts that you're reading or exposed to, or perhaps, how you're feeling in these times of COVID and how that could be impacting on on how you interpreted that text. Okay, just for a bit of fun, why not chuck in a little satirical, fantastical, or absurd reading of the text? Okay, so we came up with some hilarious ideas for this. I think somebody said it's a woman who thinks she's a cow. A few people said she's woken up from a massive night out, doesn't know where she is. Okay, something funny. Write down your answer. For example, a UFO mistaking a garage for a giant human. So then, like, these things are sort of like, oh God. These are like zipping it. Oh my God. Sorry, zipping it up into the air. What else have we got? A mechanical walrus closing on its prey. An architect's wildest fantasy, a futuristic Wizard of Oz on stage off the line. Something funny. Pause it here. Give it a go. Okay, so let me tell you now that this text is called My Egypt by Charles Demuth, or Demuth, I don't know how to pronounce it, and it was composed in 1927. So, does the title of this text now change your interpretation? Alright, so now we're looking at context. How does this shape and influence our reading? Why isn't that going on to the next slide? Alright, so the composer, actually, you know what, I'm not going to read this to you. You need to read this yourself. So just pause this now, read through, and then go to the next slide. So context of the composer and text. Okay, another bit of context on the painting itself. Please pause this now and read through. Does this change the way you read the text or interpret the text? Okay, so here's a few different readings or interpretations from art critics and just general art lovers. Demuth and some artists in the early 20th century were fascinated by the American industrial landscape, machines and architecture that were symbols of growth and prosperity. Another reading. His title of My Egypt connects to the story of Exodus. Egypt was the symbol of the Jews' oppression. As an invalid later in life, Demuth was exiled in his hometown in Lancaster, bedridden in his parents' house. So very allegorical, that reading. Another one, a reminder of the American soil as fertile as that of the ancient Nile. So these are really looking, very much influenced by the title of the text. Okay, a few more. Please pause and read through these yourself. And another one. Okay, so we've got a nice collection of readings. Please pause and read through. Okay, so critical reading. So now you've considered your personal response. You've done a close reading by identifying techniques that shaped meaning. You've looked at the context of the reader. You've looked at other readings. What is your critical reading of the text? Okay, so on your document where you've done your reading, your close reading, and your humorous reading, provide a 1 to 3 sentence interpretation and 2 pieces of evidence that support and consolidate that argument. So piece of evidence, you're looking at your visual techniques. Okay. Extension, considering other close readings, other critical readings, can you prove why your reading is correct and more accurate than the other readings that are less credible? Okay, so finally, why would students need to develop a very clear and strong interpretation of the text study as opposed to an ambiguous or flexible reading? Essentially, students need to be able to comprehensively determine why their interpretation is correct and potentially why others are less credible or wrong. The question for this module often requires an evaluation or a to what extent style response. However, while students need to have a clear and strong interpretation, they need to know the text extensively in order to explain why other readings have been established. Students must be able to argue their case, but also understand and support